I think one of the interesting pieces, especially kind of using security as a linchpin, because it's always in the news. I don't want to say, it's ever present, but there's usually things that are catching you either within conversations like this, where we're kind of hopping in, talking to other folks. And you kind of lean on some of those elements of saying, hey, we need it, right? Because there's such an ongoing threat that's kind of outside of the realm. Now kind of taking on a different approach, or when you're looking at kind of, budgeting, or looking at items that aren't as, I'd say, coveted or sexy as kind of other security upgrades, how do you manage to kind of have those conversations where it's a little bit harder to kind of describe intrinsically the value that might be bringing to the organization, or something that you feel passionate around, either whether it's kind of improving the overall posture, right? And this is kind of one other piece that fit within your larger plans. I'm curious, kind of how do you approach those conversations when it comes to budgeting, planning, and kind of adding that into your priority mix?
In our case, we had, before I got there, actually, they had a case of corporate espionage, and a break-in, as well as I can't remember if it was one of the crypto locker, but one of the viruses just destroyed, fortunately not the main database, but just about everything else. So they kind of had going in a grasp of, this is what goes wrong when you don't pay attention to security. But yeah, it is hard, because how do you describe to the guy that does most of his time in working with the metal of the machines about, well, this server is going to be vulnerable if we don't do this. I mean, it's like, what does that do? So trying to explain that, yeah, there's a certain level you have to kind of just level that field, just talk about that, and just be there.
Baseline, we're doing it.
Hopefully they'll listen to you.
I echoing from what Rob said, I'm kind of in a, our CEO and founder built his first website in 1990s or whatever. And, so at our very heart, we've been a web development company. So he's always understood computing. So it's, yeah, I have to, more, convert what I'm saying into English, I guess, for everyday people, for him a little bit, but not nearly as bad as, I'm sure Rob has to when you work with manufacturing and metal equipment all day long.
The owner of the company started in '86, and if I remember correctly, he ran the entire company off an Apple II GS. Wrote most of the software himself, but
Nice.
that was the original owner. It's long since moved on from his hands.
But I'd say, given the timing and the tools available at the trade, that's pretty impressive in its own right. And I think, thinking about that, right? So kind of having some of that tooling, thinking about where it needs to be modernized, what can we upgrade, kind of other pieces. Rob, you mentioned something in terms of, just kind of introducing this to users, making sure that, whatever changes we might be making on our side, there's an impact, there's a ripple effect that end users might see, come to understand. I'm curious, does that change kind of how you approach or kind of prioritize some of your projects? So for example, if you have something that's no touch, but it takes a lot of your time, or not so much of your time, but impacts more of your users, how does that kind of come into the fold when you're thinking about approaching that and kind of adding it into your priority?
The not messing with the user's workflow is probably number one. I mean, don't mess with that if you can help it. Cost and retraining, pushback, any untold reasons why they'll be like, oh, we don't want this. It's just one more reason for them to not say no to you and what you need, if it's not going to mess with their daily work. But some of that has to happen. Getting rid, when I came in, like I said, small business. What's one of the things they do? One login for the whole computer for everyone. Well, that's got to go. That's not going to fly. And so yeah, there was some of there where I had to teach them that, but like, I couldn't enable MFA directly. Why? Because they don't have any concept of that, and it's hard enough getting them to change their password every 90 days. Mind you, I'd love to not do that, but PCI compliance being what it is. And so, getting them into that, easing them into it. And so it is very, very important not to mess with their workflow if you can help it.
Stephen, how about you?
Yeah, not changing workflow is huge. I learned firsthand how hard it is to get people to change their workflow when I first started. Because when I first started, there was no formal IT, any type of IT person before me. It was the CEO and COO. And if you look, it's funny, if you look in our Slack channel and just search for hashtag not a sysadmin, and so many times our lead developers, our C-suite, just every other day. So I came in and kind of evaluated everything over the first year and before getting a game plan together of what was going to have to change. But as Rob said, unfortunately, you kind of have to make these changes. You don't really have a choice. And so, the approach we did was start with the small to build the trust of the end users, and that, it sucks in the beginning, of course, but I'm doing what's best for the company, even if you can't, even if it doesn't sound like it right away, and then building on from there. So like when we adopted JumpCloud, for example, the only thing we did at first was Google, Gmail and Microsoft authentication. That was all we did at first, because it was just a quick, easy buy-in. They realized it wasn't going to do much. After that, we started adopting our computers into it, so doing, managed devices, servers, and then we started building out the SSO applications and everything from there.
Please subscribe and check out more content from us.